In the final 6 months of his presidential tenure, Joe Biden seems to have set his sights on major reforms in the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, at an event in Austin, Texas, President Biden slammed extremism in the institution, claiming that the apex court had been undermining public confidence.
Addressing his supporters at the event marking the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act at the Lyndon B. Johnson Presidential Library in Austin, Biden issued this call for major reforms to tenure limits while also asking lawmakers to ratify a constitutional amendment limiting presidential immunity.
I have great respect for our institutions and the separation of powers laid out in our Constitution. But what's happening now is not consistent with that doctrine of separation of powers. Extremism is undermining the public confidence in the court's decisions.
Biden's push for Supreme Court reforms comes mere 90 days away from the U.S. presidential elections. Currently, the institution holds 9 Supreme Court justices in office, with 6 judges leaning conservative and 3 leaning towards more liberal policies. This has proven to be a major thorn for the Democrats, as the current bench has overseen divisive and, some argue, regressive judgments concerning abortion rights and federal regulatory powers that have stood unchallenged for decades.
There have also been concerns over the proximity and bias of conservative justices towards Republican lawmakers. Case in point, Justice Clarence Thomas, who was found to have been accepting luxurious vacations at the behest of billionaire Republican donor Harlan Crow. Justice Thomas was hit by articles of impeachment by Democratic Senator Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez earlier this month as well.
President Biden has issued calls to rid Supreme Court judges of their lifetime appointments to the court. In its stead, Biden proposes legislation should be passed in the Congress to establish a system wherein the sitting president appoints a justice to the apex court every 2 years. For a tenure of 18 years, Biden argues that this measure will ensure that the composition of the court thus changes with some periodical and democratically given the nomination process.
Biden has also called upon Congress to establish a court code of ethics that would require justices to disclose gifts, refrain from public political activity, and recuse themselves from cases in which they or their spouses have conflicts of interest, financial or otherwise.
Lastly, the president has also called upon Congress to reverse the Supreme Court's recent landmark presidential immunity ruling. The contentious ruling extended the delay in the Washington criminal case against Donald Trump on the charges of plotting to overturn the results of the 2020 elections.
The court is not self-policing. The court is not dealing with the obvious conflicts of interest. We need a mandatory code of ethics for the Supreme Court, and we need it now.
And for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report from New York. Listen to this.
It is President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris's proposal to reform the Supreme Court a thinly veiled attempt to politicize the judiciary and undermine conservative justices. Well, the plan, which includes term limits and ethic rules, is being touted as a way to restore confidence in the court. Skeptics say that it will lead to a weakened conservative majority and pave the way for liberal ideology. Harris is using this proposal to launch her presidential campaign and appeal to progressive voters. But how will moderate voters and independents view this proposal? Regardless, the proposal is dead on arrival in the House. Republicans say the Democrats are seeking to change the system because they disagree with recent decisions, particularly on abortion rights. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION The World.